The Dogs and the Fox. Some dogs once found a lion's skin and were worrying it with their teeth. Just then a fox came by and said, "You think yourselves very brave, no doubt, but if that were a live lion, you should find his claws a good deal sharper than your teeth." Lesson: it is easy to act brave in the absence of danger. The Swallow and the Other Birds. A farmer sowing his fields with flax was observed by a swallow who, like the rest of her tribe, had traveled a good deal and was very clever. Among other things, she knew that of this same flax, when it grew up, nets and snares would be made to entrap her little friends, the birds of the country. Hence, she earnestly besought them to help her in picking up and eating the hateful seed before it had time to spring from the ground. But food of a much nicer kind was then so plentiful, and it was so pleasant to fly about and sing, thinking of nothing, that they paid no attention to her entreaties. By and by the blades of flax appeared above the ground, and the anxiety of the swallow was renewed. "It is not yet too late," said she. "Pull it all up blade by blade, and you may then escape the fate which is otherwise in store for you. You cannot, like me, fly to other countries when danger threatens you here." The little birds, however, took no notice of the swallow, except to consider her a very troublesome person, whom silly fears had set beside herself. In the course of time the flax grew, ripened, and was gathered, spun, and made up into nets, as the swallow had foretold. When the nets were set, the birds could scarcely venture forth without some of their number being caught, and many a little captive thought, in dying, of the swallow they had held to be so crazy, while the swallow, in despair at their thoughtless ways, has since preferred the society of men to that of her former companions. Lesson: prevention is better than care. The Man and the Fox. A man whose vines and orchards had suffered greatly from the ravages of foxes one day caught one of these animals in a trap. In a great rage, he tied up the fox's tail with tow that had been steeped in turpentine, set a light to it, and let him run. Mad with pain and fright, the fox ran through a large field in which, ripe for the harvest, stood corn belonging to his tormentor. The corn caught fire, and the flames, fanned by the wind, spread over the field and laid it to waste. The man lamented bitterly that he had not chosen some safer and less cruel means of revenge. Lesson: do not let your anger crush your wisdom. Also, be nice to animals. That's rude. The Ass Laden with Salt and Sponges. A man drove his ass to the seaside, and having purchased there a load of salt, proceeded on his way home. In crossing a stream, the ass stumbled and fell. It was some time before he regained his feet, and by that time the salt had all melted away, and he was delighted to find that he had lost his burden. A little while after that, the ass, when laden with sponges, had occasion to cross the same stream. Remembering his former good luck, he stumbled this time on purpose, and was surprised to find that his load, so far from disappearing, became many times heavier than before. Lesson: the same ploy does not often succeed twice. The Ass Eating Thistles. An ass, laden with very choice provisions, which he was carrying in harvest time to the field for his master and the reapers, stopped by the way to eat a large and strong thistle that grew by the roadside. "Many people would wonder," said he, "that with such delicate viands within reach I do not touch them. But to me this bitter and prickly thistle is more savory and relishing than anything else in the world." Lesson: what is one man's poison is another man's meat. The Two Lizards. Two lizards were basking under a wall. "How contemptible is our condition," said one of them. "We exist, 'tis true, but that is all, for we hold no sort of rank in creation, and are utterly unnoticed by the world. Cursed obscurity! Why was I not rather born a stag, to range at large, the pride and glory of some royal forest?" Just then a pack of hounds was heard in full cry after the very creature he was envying, who, being quite spent with the chase, was torn to pieces by the dogs in sight of the two lizards. "And this is the lordly stag whose place you wish to hold," said the wiser lizard to his complaining friend. "Let his sad fate teach you to be content with your lot." Lesson: contentment is not a matter of rank or position. The Shepherd turned Merchant. A shepherd who kept his sheep at no great distance from the sea one day drove them close to the shore, and sat down on a rock to enjoy the cool breeze. It was a beautiful summer day, and the ocean lay before him, calm, smooth, and of an enchanting blue. As he watched the white sails and listened to the measured plash of the tiny wavelets on the pebbled beach, his heart thrilled with pleasure. "How happy," exclaimed he, "should I be if in a tight, trim bark of my own, with wings like a bird, I could skim that lovely plain, visit other lands, see other peoples, and become rich in ministering to their wants and pleasures." He sold his flock and all that he had, bought a small ship, loaded her with dates, and set sail. A storm arose. The cargo was thrown overboard to lighten the ship, but in spite of all efforts, she was driven upon a rock near the shore and went to pieces. The shepherd narrowly escaped with his life, and was afterwards glad to earn his bread by watching the flock which had formerly been his own. In the course of time, when by care and frugality he had again become possessed of some amount of wealth, he happened to find himself sitting on the self-same rock, and on just such another lovely day as that on which he had resolved to become a merchant. The sea lapped temptingly at the beach at his feet. "Foolish sea," the shepherd cried, "do you think I am ass enough to try you a second time? You want some more dates, do you?" Lesson: experience is a sure teacher. Hercules and Plutus. When Hercules was raised to the dignity of a god and took his place on Olympus, he went round and paid his respects to all the gods and goddesses, excepting only Plutus, the god of wealth, to whom he made no sign. This caused much astonishment, and Jupiter, at the first favorable opportunity, asked Hercules for an explanation. "Why," answered he, "I have seen that god in the company of such rascals when on earth, that I did not know whether it would be considered reputable to be seen talking with him in heaven." Lesson: wealth and respectability are often at variance. The Beggar and His Dog. A beggar and his dog sat at the gate of a noble courtier, and were preparing to make a meal on a bowl of fragments that had been brought out by the kitchen maid. A poor dependent of his lordship's, who had been sharing the singular favor of a dinner at the steward's table, was struck with the appearance, and stopped a little to observe them. The beggar, hungry and voracious as any courtier in Christendom, seized with greediness the choicest morsels, and swallowed them himself. The residue was divided into portions for his children. A scrap was thrust into one pocket for honest Jack, a crust into another for bashful Tom, and a luncheon of cheese was wrapped up with care for the little favorite of his hopeful family. In short, if anything was thrown to the dog, it was a bone so closely picked that it scarce afforded to pittance to keep life and soul together. "How exactly alike," said the dependent, "is this poor dog's case and mine? He is watching for a dinner from a master who cannot spare it. I for a place from a needy lord whose wants perhaps are greater than my own, and whose relations are more clamorous than any of this beggar's brats." Lesson: 'tis misery to depend upon patrons whose circumstances make their charity necessary at home. The Camel. When men first saw the camel, they were so frightened at his vast size that they fled away. After a time, perceiving the meekness and gentleness of his temper, they summoned courage enough to approach him. Soon afterwards, observing that he was an animal altogether deficient in spirit, they assumed such boldness as to put a bridle in his mouth, and to set a child to drive him. Lesson: use services to overcome dread.